like, I really wish I brought my wig. Oh, hey guys.
I would have brought like 5 wigs.
So which wig would you have gone with?
I would have gone with like the big Baroque one that's like this big.
White?
And super. Oh.
Hey. Hey everybody. So welcome back to another session of our founder sessions with no wigs. My name is Jonathan Goss. I'm the founder and CEO of Nomad Financial. I'm excited this week to have Mia Zucar Merrill, also known as Mizam. With us. She's an expert at Nomad on people and culture. She runs that group for us. And given that we focus a lot on the early stage, high growth space, we don't just focus on financial services. You know, we have to build a business as well. And I think given that Mia is an important part of that for us, we'd love for her to share her knowledge with you guys. So given that, Mia, why don't you give an introduction about yourself? You have a pretty unique background, to say the least. She was gonna try to gloss over a few things, but we're having none of that.
Yeah, so I'll just dive right into it then. So MZM, Mia Zucar Merrill here. I think if we're asking like how I got here, is that really the question?
Yeah.
So basically I graduated from college and then I went right into entertainment production, and everybody knows here that my first job was actually working on the Jerry Springer show, where I actually recruited the talent. So that's kind of where I got the beginning of my career. After that, after being in entertainment production, working on a ton of different shows, I realized that wasn't really for me. Went back to graduate school, got really interested in the startup space. And then while at Columbia, I went on the Columbia Venture Community List, CVC. What's up, Mark Peter Davis? And that's how I found Interplay. So I was working at Interplay as the director of talent there for around 2 over 2 years, working with you, helping you build your team a little bit, and then you recruited me.
What did I tell you like a month in?
A month in, you were like, "I'm gonna get you."
Yeah,
well, maybe not in those words.
Yeah. Let me tell you exactly what I said, since I want to be no question. I'm going to hire you.
Yes.
You're going to be full time at Nomad.
Yes, you did say that.
I may have threatened to possibly stab somebody to make that happen, but neither here nor there. And it did. I mean, you joined, not that...
no one got hurt in the process.
No one got hurt, okay. Yeah, so given that, you know, you're currently running People and Culture at Nomad, what are some of the other projects you're also working on?
So I also am a co-founder with you. Hey, Mom. In the Candid Entrepreneur. And so the Candid Entrepreneur is a quarterly event series. And what we do there is we highlight unfiltered accounts of the startup experience. And we've done some pretty cool events, like not to pat myself and you on the back, but...
Continue.
Yeah, go on. But we've done them in the cannabis space, politics. We've done them in breaking the taboo, like different industries that are kind of undercover that people aren't as interested in. And we are now working on an event in sustainable fashion. So it's been really exciting. It certainly takes a lot of work, but it's great just to kind of get out there, meet people in the ecosystem, and have impact. So
yeah, and given what we're doing there, how do you feel like that connects? What is it about that deeply touches you in wanting to be involved in the community that connects to the people and culture aspect? Where do you see the pieces coming together there?
The pieces between just the events that we put on and like So I think that the reason why we started Candid was obviously to bring, you know, awareness and insight and knowledge to the community, but I also think that we're trying to uncover like the realness, not to like use that word like it's not a big deal, but I mean a lot of times when it comes to events, people aren't necessarily, they kind of blow smoke in order to look good, and I think our goal with doing the Candid Entrepreneur is to really have in-depth conversations, and the way that would convert back to our culture is that those are things that are really important to us. I mean, when we hire anyone for any position at Nomad, we're looking for people who are egoless, coachable, welcoming, warm, and reliable, and that's exactly what we're trying to get out of people when we have discussions with people who are panelists on the Candid Entrepreneur.
It's just like the Boy Scout motto, but shorter and more punctual.
Totally.
So, given that, let's talk recruiting a little bit.
Okay.
And let's start at a high level. Is it hard to find financial talent?
Yes. Well, I think the caveat with finding financial talent with this and working at Nomad is that we're trying to find accountants and finance people who are also super interested in startups. And a lot of times when it comes to people in finance, they're really interested in like the stability of finance, which isn't to say that Nomad isn't stable, but just working at a startup with startups is a completely different mentality. And so I think finding the people who kind of meet both of that criteria, and well, it's more than that, it's an interest in finance, an interest in startups, and also meet what's important to us from a cultural standpoint, I would say is kind of a challenge. Yeah.
And say, on the audience here, people are thinking about how they're going through recruiting challenges, particularly early on when they don't have somebody like you in the role, they're doing it themselves. What is, how should somebody prepare themselves for it? Are there certain KPIs and metrics they should think about? Is there a process they should run despite the fact they still may be an early stage company and pretty lightweight in terms of their team numbers?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that especially when it comes to your first few hires, it's really important because you're kind of establishing the culture of your company, the team dynamics, and I mean, groupthink. You want people to kind of work together and collaborate, and if you're not sure on exactly what you're looking for, then you're not going to find it, right? And I think
that being not sure meaning
not sure exactly what you're looking for in your candidate. So I think that a lot of times, and something that I've learned through the process of being a recruiter and working with startups, is that sometimes we think we know what we want in a candidate and we know what we want in a profile, to later realize that isn't what we want, and then we have to pivot. So I think that the sooner that you can really pinpoint exactly what your needs are and exactly what the outcomes you need this person to accomplish, then you're able to kind of take a step back, figure out what the process is, and then find that person. But until then, you don't always know.
And that list is both the technical aspects of the job, their ability to deliver, along with culture, and tightly defining both of those when you go to market, and really being, it's like dating, right? You need to really be thoughtful about, is this somebody that I want to commit to?
Yes. I mean, it's a huge, when you're hiring, it's a huge commitment on both ends. You're bringing somebody on your team, you're relying on them to complete a certain activity and be exceptional in a certain way, and this person is giving up whatever job they had or their first job out of school to come and commit to you. So it certainly is like dating, and it really is important to make sure that you're asking the right questions, getting the right answers, and pressing people to be like, is this the right fit for both of us? Because it's like dating. It's more like marriage, It's more like marriage.
It's a fair point. What mistakes you made? So, you love authenticity. I think
the connection between drink of water for this one.
Yeah, between talking about candid entrepreneurship and your passion in recruiting. Let's be honest with the audience. Let's share maybe some mistakes that you've made that you've learned from.
Absolutely. I think I feel like I'm not always making mistakes, but it's like if you're not trying hard, then you're not making enough mistakes, and that isn't good, right? So I'll preface it by saying that. I think that
no qualifiers necessary. We all make mistakes pretty regularly, right? It's a learning opportunity.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. I think when it comes to recruiting, the mistakes that you can make, and I kind of spoke to it previously, of not necessarily knowing exactly what you're looking for, and maybe not in the beginning being as thoughtful about who we're looking for in certain hires. So for instance, before I started hiring salespeople, I didn't know what a salesperson really was supposed to be, right? And it wasn't until maybe hiring a few people for different companies that I realized, oh wait, this is the exact profile that we're looking for in a salesperson. And so in the past, I might have brought someone on and been like, we should hire this person, with not knowing that they maybe didn't have the specific characteristics of a great salesperson. So that would be one example of a mistake that I think that I've made, that I've learned from. And I also think it's a continual process with recruiting. You have to always be refining, always, and not stop.
Great. Any other mistakes you could point to, maybe in terms of you hired people, but they actually weren't qualified for the job?
Yeah, absolutely. That's happened too. I think that when you're working at a startup and you're also creating the recruiting processes from the beginning, before I came on to some of these companies, they didn't have a recruiting process. They didn't know where to even start or begin. And so again, in the beginning, and I kind of spoke to this before, if you don't have the specific qualifications, if you're not exactly sure of what you're looking for, then you can hire someone who maybe meets 4 of the criteria but not 5 when you really need all 5.
And how do you check for that, right? So some of the things maybe you can look at work experience, you can look at work history, you can look at their personality, assess whether they're a fit for certain pieces, but how do you make sure that they can actually come in and execute on the work?
Yeah, so I think I can use the example of the accountants that we're hiring currently. So something that we had learned previous...
Plug on our process.
Yeah, so something that we had learned was we actually need to do an accounting assessment. And prior to us doing an accounting assessment, we didn't necessarily know the skill set level of the people that we were hiring. We thought that they had a great background, we thought that they were fantastic, they might have been a good cultural fit for our organization, but then when it came to actually executing the work, we had no way of knowing, and therefore like people made mistakes, and so we did have to let people go based off of the fact that they just weren't doing the work properly.
So you went from it was a traditional interview where you might ask accounting questions, but you only get so far and so deep, and people can prepare for those versus a deeper dive.
Now we do a 90-minute take-home accounting assessment where they have 90 minutes to complete certain tasks. They have to get it back to us, and then we're grading them based on obviously the first round phone call, their experience, and this accounting assessment, which is really helpful for us to really dig deep to know, do they have the chops? And then we're really focusing on culture after that, in addition to just accounting skill set.
Got it. Awesome. Well, let's shift back to the startup community. What had attracted to you to the startup community? What do you feel special about it?
Absolutely. I think I feel like I'm a startup only type of person, and I feel like to be in startups, you have to be extremely flexible. You also have to be really entrepreneurial and want to get work done. And it's, I mean that's just me. But I think what attracts me to the community is just people who kind of have those characteristics and then some, and who are really smart and ambitious. And being around people with that sort of energy is really energizing to me. And so I think that's what it's about.
And when you think about the culture, maybe the Silicon Valley culture, Silicon Alley here in New York, and the tech community, how's that culture weaved itself in the businesses you've been around? What are the trade-offs? What are the positives and negatives of that culture that you've experienced?
For sure. So I feel like with the Silicon Valley vibe, I mean, there's kind of like stereotypes around what that looks like, and people watch like Silicon Valley, the show, and they're like, oh, like that's the way cultures are, like when in SF. I personally have never worked at a company there, but I do know that there's kind of this great ambiances and like dogs running around the office. Like there's a lot, like just like being more free and open and that sort of thing, which I think is something that we all have here, and I do think that we take from San Francisco just because it is like the pinnacle of the startup community. And in terms of things, the lows and the highs of being startup, I think the constant change is something that people, they're like, oh yeah, like I want to be in a really innovative setting, but they don't realize that that means constant change, and that means that we are constantly moving pieces, and you really need to be able to roll with the punches. And so I think that for some people that's positive if you're really flexible and adaptable, but for other people it can be a really big challenge.
That's a great point, right? The idea that your role and the structure of how the organization is can change multiple times a year as the company is really trying to figure out who they are, what's working, what's not working, and how they can grow and scale.
Yeah.
Great. And when you kind of talk, you do a lot of recruiting millennials. When we talk about the current generation, how do they weigh the importance of culture? What does that mean to them? And do you think that's a positive or a negative?
I think it's a positive. I mean, I think that there's, as millennials, like obviously we're slightly more entitled than earlier generations because we've, at least some of us have parents who came here and they worked really hard, and so we have more options. And I think we're also kind of looking for this self-actualization piece of wanting to actually work with people in a place that we feel comfortable where we can grow and learn.
Shout out to my 2008, 2009 graduates of college, millennials, because I know you guys did not have it easy. You entered a terrible, terrible job market. So
and that's why that might be why I ended up at Jerry Springer, but maybe not. We don't know. But I think that culture is obviously obviously, but it's very important to some people, and the fact that we actually get to have that choice now is fantastic. Because in previous generations, it wasn't really an option. It's like you worked at a corporate culture, that was what you did. You stayed there for 30 years, and now we're working in a situation where people have more options. They say that millennials are actually going to switch careers 5 times within the span
of the first decade, right?
Yeah, within the first decade. Whereas back in the day, it was kind of like you chose one path and that's where you went. So I think it's good that we have that flexibility. I'm the type of person where, as someone who identifies as being creative, that's really important. So,
what do you think some of the millennial traits are that might get ignored that are positives for a business when they're hiring? When you see all these articles about how millennials are entitled, how they don't have the same work ethic, how they're not motivated just to make money or raise a family, the same core things which many are. Paraphrasing what other people have said. What are the positive aspects you see of millennials that when you're building a culture that really helps attract them in and help them perform?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's two ways to look at something, right? It could be that someone is entitled, or maybe somebody has a ton of ideas and they want them to be heard, and they want to, be really ambitious and maybe jump like 2 or 3 steps in their career, maybe without working for it. I don't know if I feel like that's kind of a thing that people say.
Well, it's thinking on being heard, right? This idea that I think there is an old school mentality around people expecting you have to earn your chops and prove that you can do 80 tasks, and then I'll listen to your idea for something over here, even though sometimes if you just listen to the idea that the person's bringing in, 1, that discussion allows them to learn, and 2, it may be a good idea that you're just not executing, right? I think in corporate culture there are tons of examples of companies not listening not only to their own employees who are on the front lines, but also to their clients or customers, and making pretty detrimental decisions because of that.
Absolutely. I mean, in bureaucratic corporations, getting things done, like either on the client side or internally, takes forever. And working at a startup, things can get done really quickly. And I think that a positive component of being a millennial in a startup ecosystem is that you kind of have that capability, and you have the visibility and exposure and the tools to actually get things done to get your voice heard. But it also depends on the culture of the company that you're working at, because even if you're a startup, Jonathan, you're extremely receptive to other people, and if they do have ideas, you like to listen to them. But that doesn't mean that every single CEO is like that. I think that there's an expectation that everyone should be that way. I would argue that it's probably in the best interest of the company if they can take those ideas and turn it into something. But on the opposite end, it could sometimes be detrimental depending on who you're speaking with.
Do you think millennials value work differently? I mean, we talked about that. We've already talked about kind of the generational gap. I think you've talked enough about it. I don't know if you felt like there's anything we missed on that, but then I want to bring in that into the idea of is there a difference in how people value work between generations?
Well, I think it depends on the person, right? I mean, I know that in this day and age, flexibility is super important to all of us, and super important to millennials specifically, that they kind of want to be able to work from home on Fridays, or maybe work on their way to, to get to where they're going for the weekend. And that's something that's really important to them. So yeah, I mean, I think it definitely depends on what person you're talking to or thinking about.
For founders, and the other being for people who are interested in working in startups. On the founder side, what are 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you would give to founders who are looking to recruit top talent, at a startup or high growth company?
Yeah. So when it comes to recruiting, it's 2 to 3 pieces of advice. I would say that most people are looking for certain talent, but they don't necessarily know who they are, and in not knowing who they are, they might hire the wrong person. And so something that we've done is really identify what our values are and what our mission is, so that when we hire anybody, we know that they can have this competency, but if they're not a cultural fit for us, we're going to let them go. So that would certainly be one piece of advice for me.
And in that, right, when you say if somebody's not a fit, how strict are you? Is it like if anybody says they're not a cultural fit, is that a no across the board, or do you kind of do you allow for flexibility in that?
We're pretty stringent about it. I mean, especially because we have a colleague level person interview, so if someone on our team is like, this person is not a cultural fit for XYZ reason, we listen to them. It's really important.
Yeah.
And so I mean, another piece of advice is listen to your people. If you as the CEO of a company feel really strongly, like, that's great. But if there's 3 people telling you that you shouldn't hire that person, then you probably you should listen.
Yeah.
So that would be another piece of advice. And then finally, I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that if you have anyone doing anything specific at your company, test them before you hire them. Because otherwise you're going to hire them and you won't know. And it might turn out that they're exceptional at what they do, but they might not be. And then that will just be a lot of money that you're wasting. Yeah,
and how about for people who are seeking the job side? What advice could you give to them as somebody who is the face that they're sitting across from when they're trying to get hired?
Yeah. With startups especially, I think that we are looking for authenticity at this point. Most startups, we're looking for real people. Like, we want the culture. Like Tony Hsieh from Zappos is all about like delivering happiness and making a really great and happy organization. And if you're not true to what you're applying for, then it's going to be more challenging to actually get that job. So I would recommend, obviously like doing your homework on the company, but also making sure you're really clear on what you want, so that you can show up to the interview and be like, I actually want this, as opposed to like, I maybe want this. Because if you maybe want it, the recruiter on the other end is probably going to be able to tell.
Well, I think that wraps up our conversation here. I do want to give a shout out to Namli again, who's behind the camera over here. Nam's the guy who
What's up, Nam?
never shows face, but makes this happen.
One day.
Yeah.
I'll be on that side.
Yeah, one day he'll be on this side. Outside of that, we thank everybody for joining us. We look forward to having you guys catch more of our founder sessions in the future. If you have any ideas of things you'd like to get covered, whether it's finance or startup related, investing related, shoot us a note, an email, hit our info page at nomadfinancial.com, message on this video, and we'll make sure to take that into consideration. I don't think we had any questions this time, so we'll let you guys go, and have a great week.